And now I'll introduce myself, Peter. I'm Brian Grossman. I'm editor-in-chief of the Colorado Springs Independent, the Business Journal, and our military newspaper group newspapers. So
fantastic.
And I'll ask you the same thing. We'll start with that. Why don't you introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
Sure. Peter Lupia, and we're speaking today in my capacity as a candidate for El Paso County Clerk and Recorder.
Yep. And you want to give us some background, where you're from, just
sure.
Sort of personal info?
Yeah, absolutely. So my family's fifth generation here in El Paso County. So my father's a retired two-star general, graduate of the Air Force Academy. So I moved around as a child, obviously, or grew up in an Air Force environment all around the world. And so my family and I settled back here in, July of 2000, and have been involved in the community here ever since.
Okay. And if Glenn does hop on, Glenn is the editor of the Southeast Express. That's one of the papers in our publishing house. He's also a member of the editorial board.
Okay.
We'll be making the endorsements. So this is two-fifths of the editorial board.
Yeah, sorry I was late.
So background that's relevant to this office. What makes you qualified to do this?
Well, Brian, as a business consultant, I find my skill sets will match this job very well. When I look at what is asked of the Clerk and Recorder's office, I work with small, medium-sized companies with budgets in the tens of millions of dollars, multi-division, hundreds of employees. And so my skill sets fit in across this position very well to be able to serve the community in that way.
Okay. Specifically, do you have some examples?
Well, I sign non-disclosure agreements with my clients, so I can't mention any client names specifically. Sure. But I typically work with a company. I serve in a C-suite type of a role to go through their plans and their operations. We look at opportunities, threats, and strengths and weaknesses, all those different sorts of things. And then we put together a plan to move them forward. And so I engage with them in that way and help them achieve those things. So those are the same sorts of skills I would bring to the Clerk and Recorder's office, just looking for opportunities to improve, make operational improvements, reduce costs, provide better stewardship, whatever we can do. Again, it's the people's money. It's, as a constituent, I don't want any more of my tax dollars being used than we have to. So I want to make sure that we're serving the community and constituents in the same manner.
Okay. I've heard people within the Clerk and Recorder's office, and even outside of our Clerk and Recorder's office, talk about how Colorado is looked at by other states as an example of how elections should be run. On your website, and this is a quote, it says, "Our election processes, procedures, and systems are in a state of dysfunction and disrepair." So there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect there. Why are those in office right now wrong, and what do you mean by that statement?
I would answer that by saying I believe many in office right now are not providing both sides of the story. They're not being transparent. They're not giving complete information, and so
can I clarify? Do you mean El Paso County Clerk and Recorder? Do you mean on a larger scale? Who do you mean by that?
It's starting at the local level all the way up through the state level. Okay. Officials all the way up and down the line, okay. I would say there are just lots of questions that need to be answered, and there has not been a willingness to do that, it doesn't seem. And so I believe that's where people are frustrated and upset, and why there is so much question. And regardless of where you fall on the spectrum politically, elections are important, and people believe that elections should be done properly and openly and transparently. And I think that's what people are looking for, and that's what I'd like to give the opportunity for us constituents to have trust and faith in the election process, and have information that allows them to be informed and make educated decisions, and to have both sides of the information.
Can you, I guess, be a little more specific? When you say from the top to the bottom, we are talking about a local race here. Specifically, can you tell me what has not been transparent about the current administration or the current office?
Sure. Well, I can say I know there are a number of constituents that I've spoken throughout the county that have made requests for information to try to get information, things that theoretically should be publicly available to them fairly easily through either Cora requests or et cetera. They've been denied that information. So again, there are people seeking answers. I would refer you to if you want to watch the county commission meeting from April the 5th, and also the week prior to that. And some of the things that the county, that our current clerk stood up and said in front of and to the county commission and in front of constituents who were in the room, and there were a couple hundred people in the room there listening. A lot of contradictions, a lot of inaccuracies that were shown to be truth. And so I think those are examples of things that cannot continue to happen. And those are areas where I draw those conclusions from.
You also said that people have a lot of questions. Specifically, can you address some of those questions? What are those questions specifically? And I guess, how would you go about answering those questions if you were elected?
Sure. Well, I think one of the big things is people would just like to have full disclosure on what has happened in prior elections. People would like to be able to have access to information, to draw their own conclusions, to be able to look at things and draw their own conclusions. And the folks that I have spoken to that have sought information are given bits and pieces of information that maybe fit into a specific side of the story or only tell one side of the story. And so they're not given all of the information that they're looking for to be able to, to be able to make their own decisions and come to their own conclusions.
Specifically,
elections.
Like, what is an example?
Elections, the voter records, the ballots, access to things that by law the clerk and recorder's office should be storing, and people have been denied access to that information.
I'm still not clear specifically on what they're being denied. When you say ballots, they're being denied a ballot?
No, they're the results of election results, the ballots and election results information. So.
And I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, because
federal law requires 22 months of storage of election information. State law requires storage of information for 25 months. So the information should be readily available and easily available. And that information has been not made available to people that have asked for it.
Across the board, you know, every single person who's asked for that information has not been provided with it?
I would say that that's kind of an unusual question, because I don't know everybody, so I can't.
No, that's not what I'm asking. Everybody you know who's made that allegation across the board, that everyone that's made that allegation to you, as far as you know, have not been able to obtain those records.
I have spoken to more than one person who have relayed to me they have requested information and have not been able to gain access to it. Yes.
Okay. But you've not independently verified that. You've just taken their word for it.
I have not tried to make requests for the same information. No. So I'm taking constituents' word for
it. You also mentioned on your website here, it's allegations. I guess you say that you would pursue the cancellation of Dominion vote tabulation devices if you won. What do you have against Dominion?
I think they're, again, going back to the earlier question, they just leave a lot of information that people would like to see not available, since the Secretary of State's office and Dominion employees are the only ones that were allowed to touch the machines or work on the machines in any way, shape, or form. There are just, there are a lot of questions about how those machines operate and who has influence over the way they operate.
I'm not entirely sure, but don't Secretary of State's offices in every state who oversee all the elections, either they or the ones that they contract to work on the machines are the only ones to touch them? They're not, you and I can't go in and work on a machine, right?
No, I'm not an IT technician, nor are you. I don't.
But
I can't speak to your qualifications.
Legally speaking, there's nothing nefarious about them being the only ones to access it, because that's normal across the board. Am I right? Every state would probably have those same rules. It's a security, a security issue, so they wouldn't allow anybody access to it.
To my understanding, information from other states, they are not solely controlled by the Secretary of State or the vendor who supplies the information. So there are other jurisdictions.
Do you have examples?
I know in Arizona is a specific jurisdiction where county level employees who are responsible for elections have access to making sure that the machines run properly.
It beyond the clerk and recorder's office, or
yeah,
like a county commissioner would have access to the.
No, you have there are people that are certified election officials. So
okay.
not only clerk and recorder. In other parts of the country, it's not only a clerk and recorder who's responsible for those things. So there different people have the role of being the certified election official. So whoever those people are in other jurisdictions, they do have access into the machines and or can be present when the Secretary of State or the contractor is there working on the machine, which is not allowed here in Colorado.
It's not allowed?
No.
Okay. If you had to grade, I guess, the current clerk and recorder's office and the work they're doing, because this they do more than just elections, believe it or not.
They do a lot more than elections.
How would you grade, I guess, the office currently, and maybe address beyond elections what you would do in this position with the other things, your other responsibilities?
Sure. One of the things, obviously, the other big one outside of elections is the DMV office. You know, everybody rolls their eyes and takes a deep sigh when they talk about the DMV office. So there's only so much you can do with that, but there are opportunities there for things to be changed up. I think one of the things, and I'll just give you a personal experience, within the last month, I went to register my car, do the updated registration, get my annual renewal. Went to 3 different of the kiosks that they have around town where you can go do 24/7 registration. Out of 3 machines that I went to, not a single one of them worked. And so we ended up at the actual DMV office, and in talking to the representative there, saying, you know, our frustration, they're like, yeah, that's a problem. We never know if the machines are going to work or not. So I think it's important that if we're going to have services like that, we need to make sure that they're working. And if they're not going to work, then the time and expense of maintaining them doesn't seem to be worthwhile. So that's an example of something that you know, needs to be addressed. I think there are opportunities also with the DMV and clerk and recorder services as a general, or in general, I'm sorry. They're, you know, they have records storage, they have licensing for marriages and other things that they do. Those services can be made more available. And I think opportunities to put some satellite offices in areas that are growing faster, up in the north part of the county in the Monument area, out in the Falcon area, down south in the Widefield Fountain area, where they have fast growth, is to look at the opportunity to put some satellite offices there and take pressure off of the couple, 2 or 3 offices that are in town, and makes things better for constituents there, saves the constituents that are further out now from having to come all the way into town. And so there's, I think, a really good opportunity there for overall clerk and recorder services. In particular, the DMV, which is the one people interact with on the most regular basis. And I think there's an opportunity to add some services there. I have talked about and have on my website exploring making the clerk and recorder's office a passport agency, particularly the DMV offices where we're already taking pictures, we're already doing those sorts of things. So it would be something that could be symbiotic and generate some additional revenue as we look to make reductions in other areas.
Okay. Are there things that you think the office is doing exceptionally well right now that you would continue?
Off the top of my head, I think they do as good a job as they can with customer service from my experience and talking to people and dealing with people. I can say, as unpleasant as the DMV is, much like going to the dentist, everybody has a mental picture of that. I've never had a bad interaction with an employee at the DMV. So I think whatever training they've done in that area, in that particular division, has been done well. Other than that, I off the top of my head, I can't say there's anything that I would grade well.
Okay. Let's go back to some election stuff. There's been a lot of discussion about hand counting, although most, if not all, experts would tell you that computer tabulation or machine tabulation is more accurate and way faster. What's your opinion on how ballots are counted?
I believe hand counting is a opportunity to give people the clearest picture of what's happened with their counting. You can count on live stream cameras and allow people to see exactly how things are going. And so that has been my position from the beginning, that we can go to back to hand counting ballots. There are 5 counties in the state of Colorado that already do that. And so there's no reason we can't be one of them as well.
How big are the counties that do that?
They are,
population wise.
El Paso County is the largest county in the state of Colorado by population. So clearly anything that we're comparing to is going to be smaller. A couple of those counties are smaller counties down in the southwest part of the state. More recently are 3 counties along the western slope that have gone to that. And there are more that are considering doing so.
So assuming that you went to hand counting, you would probably have to hire additional people around elections to get it done anywhere near a reasonable amount of time so people know who won. How do you pay for that?
The budget has, the clerk and recorder's budget has a set amount set aside for elections. And so if we're not doing machines, and the machines, people don't remember or understand, machines take quite a bit of money to maintain. They take quite a bit of money to operate and make sure that they're doing what they need to do. So a lot of the cost would be, it would be replacing A with B or B with A, however you want to term it. So there would not be a significant amount of additional cost. You would have more people involved, but that would be, again, it would be replacing existing costs, not necessarily creating new costs.
So it sounds like you've done the math. What's the difference?
I don't have a specific number I can give you.
But you've done the math, so you know that it's apples to apples because it's just replacing one with the other?
It comes out to basically be apples to apples. It'll be a near even exchange, yes.
Do you have a ballpark figure?
Not anything I can share with you now.
No, okay. How would you work to improve? Some people would say that voters are apathetic, especially non-presidential voting years. It's true even for El Paso County. Do you have any sort of strategy to increase voter enthusiasm?
I'll go back to something we said earlier, and that's just to make sure that people have information so that they can make informed decisions and educated decisions. And so make sure that they have information from both sides of the story or whatever the case may be, and that people can make their own decisions. Again, elections are an important topic, particularly within the last couple of years. And so it's just important that as a public servant, I make sure that people have good information from both sides of the story so they can make informed decisions.
You also say on your website that you're not a career politician. Why is that important?
I am a community businessman. I have never run for political office or held political office. My Republican opponent in the primary right now has been in public service 20 plus years, over a couple of decades. He served as the current county assessor. I just don't feel it's important, or not important. I don't feel it's necessarily the best direction to have people who just move from one office to the next from an election perspective. I don't know that just because you're an elected official, that doesn't necessarily make you the most qualified or the best qualified to move from office A to office B and just move down the hall. I believe there's validation in having people that have outside perspective, that are in tune with the community, that are out in the community, that have been working in the community, versus in the isolation of that world.
So some would say, I guess, the 20 years of experience would be a benefit. How are you more qualified than your opponent?
again, I've been out in the community for over 20 years. I'm engaged with the community. I have a broad ranging expertise in business management, organizational efficiencies. That's what I do for my clients. And so operating an organization like this falls right within my bailiwick. I'll just say my opponent has been in the assessor's office. He's worked as an assessor. He's a certified assessor. And that's what he's done. He was in the military, and I appreciate his military service. But since getting out of the military, he's been at the assessor's office. So although he's worked in the elected job, I don't know that those skill sets necessarily transfer to a completely different set of skill sets that are required.
What's a mistake you've made, and how did you work to rectify it?
What's a mistake I've made? Can you give me some context as to what your expectation is there? I mean,
totally open to interpretation.
I mean, I bought the wrong set of screws at Home Depot last week, and I took them back in exchange. So I mean, you know, it's the thing to do. I think I'll just answer that question to say the thing to do when you have an issue or a problem is to take ownership of it. You figure out what the solution is, and you take responsibility for making sure that you get the issue addressed. We could walk through all sorts of different things, but I think that's the key to the whole thing is if I've created a problem or have a problem, I take responsibility for it. I take ownership of it, and then figure out what the best way is to make that solution effective and put it into operation and effect.
What kind of leader are you?
I will say I have majority of my leadership training and skill sets have come from John Maxwell. So I've had the opportunity to meet with John Maxwell, sit and speak with him personally on a couple of occasions, just briefly, but have found his materials to be things that I can get on board with. He's a godly man. He's also a pastor in addition to being a world-renowned leadership expert. And so I would just say that I've modeled my leadership style after the things that he teaches.
My last question, and we did ask your opponent this question as well. Who won the 2020 presidential election?
Donald Trump.
Okay. Glenn, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just two really quick. You mentioned that several people had told you that they had asked for information from the current clerk and recorder that they had not received voting information. Could you be a little more specific about what voting information? Because we'd love to try ourselves to see.
And I did excuse me, I did outline that for Brian a little bit. They've asked for copies of the voting results for the last few elections, information that by state and federal law should be preserved and should be easily accessible. And those things have not been.
You're provided. Not being specific though, Peter. We're asking specifically. You're saying very generalized sort of thing.
But I don't know how else to say it. The election records of the past elections.
And so, again, I can look up election records. I can go see who won the election. What do you mean by election?
Right. The specific information for ballots cast in El Paso County, for the elections in El Paso County. Ballot
like how I voted? Is that
ballots, ballot images? Well, we don't. Ballots are and voting is anonymous. So right, we're not talking about trying to find out who you voted for, anybody else voted for. But in general, there are full records. And there should be ballots available. There should be ballot images available. There should be records available electronically and hard copy as well. And people have asked for that types of information and have not been able to get full disclosure. So they get bits and pieces. And again, I'm telling you what I have been told. Mm-hmm. I have not tried to do it myself, but they have asked for that information in its entirety, and they have been given bits and pieces, but not everything that they've requested or asked for.
Two things. Can I ask how many people, when we say people, that could be, I mean, there are 8 billion people on the planet. So
Sure.
1, 2, 8 billion? How many people have told you that?
Probably a half a dozen who are interested.
6 people. And it seems like a big thing to run your campaign on, and you haven't even tried it yourself. Do you think that's odd?
No, not at all. I've spent a significant amount of my campaign focused. I've been to the legislature to testify for and against election integrity related bills. So I've been very active, and the people that have shared that information with me are just trying to get information about specifics here in El Paso County.
But you've never sought that information yourself to see if what they're telling you is valid, yet you're making these claims as part of your campaign. That
sure. Well,
seems borderline,
the people that have asked, the people that have expressed that to me are people that have credibility, and I don't think that if we asked, there would be thousands or tens of thousands of people that would like to have that information personally, but not everyone has the resources or the time to pursue that.
Sorry, Glenn, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. In criticizing the Dominion voting tabulation machines, those are checked after each election by a sample audit of election poll watchers, and that El Paso GOP provides hundreds of people for. So it sounds like you're not trusting that process. Is that a correct statement of your position?
I believe there's lots of questions with regard to how the Dominion machines work. Again, you can have as many people as you want sit in the room and watch what goes on and watch the machines. You can't see inside the machine, and you can't see what's happening inside the machine. And I know that there have been literally hundreds of affidavits given to our district attorney here regarding challenges that people have had with the elections, things that they witnessed, and those things remain with the district attorney's office waiting to be investigated.
So,
sorry, go ahead, Glenn.
Oh, just to follow up on this thread, though, the clerk and reporter is a member of the GOP. The DA is a Republican as well. Are you saying that your party is failing at each of those points of leadership in terms of checking in on what you see as a fraudulent election result, even though Donald Trump did win El Paso County?
I'm not going to speak on behalf of the entirety of the party. I think there are challenges within the party and where people stand within the party, much like there are in the Democrat Party. There are people on extremes on all sides of the party. So I'm not going to say that just because somebody has a Republican stamp on the back of their name, that necessarily makes them the best person for the job. And that, just as I would say somebody who has a Democrat doesn't necessarily make them the best or worst person for a job. So I think it comes down to the person's integrity, who they are, what they represent. And so there are some challenges. They're not necessarily related to a specific party. Those are things I think that come down to the individual person and how they want to interact.
Okay. And then my last question. In one of your recent campaign stops, you made a mention of the doctrine of the lesser magistrates, which kind of brings up a sub-theme to this whole election that we're running into a lot with the sheriff's race and the concept of a constitutional sheriff. This kind of concept that certain people in the power structure have a moral right and the authority to overrule or ignore certain laws based on certain justifications. Doctrine of the lesser magistrate definitely leans more towards the morality of the law. And talking to constitutional sheriff's candidates earlier this week, they talked a lot about kind of more of a constitutional kind of mind frame when deciding when to invalidate a law. So for you, if elected to this position, can you single out specific laws that you would not follow based on that concept?
I can just say specifically, if it violates the U.S. Constitution, the state of Colorado Constitution, or any of the laws or statutes of either that are specific to elections and how they're to be run, then I would stand in opposition to following those or enforcing them.
And you would be judging when that is appropriate, as opposed to anyone in the judicial branch?
Well, I would be taking it to the judicial branch. I mean, we have the El Paso County has an attorney who represents the county. We work with the district attorney's office. The current clerk and recorder's office actually pays for an assistant district attorney specifically to work on election and election fraud related issues. So there are avenues already in place to challenge those sorts of things. So if we have something that comes down, again, if it violates the US Constitution, the state of Colorado Constitution, or the laws or statutes as they relate to elections and what we are required to do. And again, I have to raise my hand and swear to defend the Constitution. That's part of the swearing in process for that elected office. And so those are the things that we have to stand in defense of. And so that's where, and back to your reference of the lesser magistrates, that's where that falls into.
Okay, so I guess it's more a question of procedure then, because I think most clerk and recorders would say, yes, if I saw something that I clearly thought was unconstitutional, of course I would bring it up to the DA, and of course I would bring it up to the state judicial branch and the attorneys general. But would you act unilaterally to not follow a law necessarily before, or if in opposition to, say, the DA? If would you go through the channels, or would you just not? We'd have to
go through the channels. And answering your question, yes, we have to go through the channels. But we have a county commission who I stood in front of the county commission and asked the commission president, or whatever his official title is, Stan Vanderwerf, and they came out in support of election integrity and standing on all those sorts of things, not bending to those. I know. We have a county commissioner who has testified in favor of election integrity and security measures at the state legislature just within the last, this legislative session. So we already have a commitment from our county and our county leaders and the commission that they are in favor of these things. So I don't think it would be a challenge to say, hey, team, we've got a problem here. Do we stand against it, or do we acquiesce? And so there are people that would be involved in that, but as the clerk and recorder with that primary responsibility, I would be the one to bring it to the forefront. Yes.
I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Anything else, Glenn? You good?
No, yeah, I think I'm good.
Okay. Peter, did you want to add anything before we close out here?
No, I just appreciate the time. It's been an honor to serve the people of the community here, and given the opportunity, I'd like to do that through the clerk and recorder's office and help them get the trust back and the faith back in the office, and move forward to make El Paso County as great as it can be.
Okay. We'll be putting these videos up on our website in the next couple of weeks, and then the endorsements will be out mid-June, obviously, for the election. So keep an eye out for that. We appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate your time as well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.